Stan Meador is the Earth Partners manager of 2 mitigation banks in his growing portfolio of wetland and stream banks. He has 20 years' experience in land and natural resource conservation and business operations, including key leadership positions in developing TEP's landowner outreach strategy for its myriad of projects endeavoring to create private markets in support of large-scale conservation efforts. Through this and his other work, Stan has developed a passion for finding creative opportunities for sustainable land use as well as market-based solutions for improving working lands. And without further ado, Stan Meador.
So it must have been one of the mornings on my 35-minute bike commute to school, most likely raining again, as it did seemingly every day. That's my recollection anyway, that I started to find my journey home and to the X-Bar Ranch. I didn't grow up on the ranch, but I grew up in El Dorado. And as was noted, I'm the 5th generation. And as since he already said, and for those of you who know that hometown of mine being El Dorado, and I said I was on a 35-minute daily bike commute in the rain, I obviously wasn't at home at that time. I was an exchange student living near the tulip fields of Haarlem, Holland, and I was the oldest of my generation, who was going to strike out and see the world, and did, and change the world and all the neat things that young adults think they're going to do. But I never had in that plan any time back in El Dorado, and much less on the X-Bar Ranch. And so it was through that experience and through about a 7 or 8 year journey that was what took me home. And during that time, it was living in a country that's 13 times smaller than the state of Texas. In those days, they had in the Netherlands about the same population as did the state of Texas, at about 20 million people packed into that little country. And so, as you can imagine, this dry lander from a wide open space in west central Texas really started seeing the world in a different light in many ways. And through that process and through the next 7 or 8 years of seeing that and understanding space and place, did I start feeling that tug of deep roots from home. And it was, I guess, pulling kind of more of a complete circle. It was when I started having some of those friends and acquaintances that I made in those experiences, whether they were from places around the United States or around the world, that came and visited my home, that I really started seeing the other side of the equation and started recognizing things that I'd always taken for granted as seeing as opportunities. And so in my mind, this was still an opportunity of saying, wow, this is a pretty neat place. I never thought of it like that. But I can see how other people do. And so that is what's unique about the place, right? It is different. It is its own. It has its own special features. And so it was just this idea of, wow, people would really be interested in coming and seeing and experiencing what it is that we do and take for granted. And so on a trip home, at this point, and later on during that 7-year journey, I came home on a visit from Spain, and much to my shock, the conversation at the dinner table one night at home where I grew up was a discussion about which land broker we should engage could help us maximize selling as few acres as possible to be able to keep as many as possible. And those kind of conversations are the tough ones. They focus the mind and energy quite dramatically. And fortunately, we never had to pull the trigger on that, but we were real close. We were having those conversations. And I think at that point, that was the impetus that really kind of started pulling everything together in my mind of taking something that I was thinking of as a potential opportunity and really putting a plan into action. And in fact, later that year, that same year, we hatched the idea of the X-Bar Ranch Nature Retreat, which is now in its 21st year of operating. And so, you know, I could spend the rest of the afternoon up here telling stories about lessons learned and all of the interesting things that we've experienced during that journey. But the two big takeaways that I think are pertinent to here is, one is that I had, at the time, there were three generations, with me coming back and getting involved, there were three generations: my grandfather, who was born on the ranch in 1921, my dad, and myself. And I had full support from the family, and still do to this day. And in fact, my grandfather and I, we argued until the day he died about whose idea it was first to do this and to open up the ranch to have people come out and stay and experience what we have, our little place, to what we're trying to take care of and keep together as part of our family heritage. And so it is important, and we've heard similar situations of people talking about today, and we'll hear more about creating space and opportunity for that next generation to bring ideas and to try something new and different. And so, as you can tell, I was very fortunate in that way of having that support from everybody else in the family that was involved. But also, the other important piece of that is, had it not been for me making the decision to come back and get involved, they would have never taken that idea past it being an idea. And so it did take both sides of the equation to really pull something together and create something new. The other thing that I think, and I've learned and reflected on over the years and have found to be very important, is how you define success, right? And we've, again, heard a little bit about this today, and it is important, and that's, you know, how success is defined can change, and that doesn't mean we're using that as a crutch because we don't hit certain milestones or things we're looking to do, but things can change. And one of the ways that I was defining success, and don't even know that I really knew it at the time, but I always knew that I wanted to do something more and wanted to be involved in a bigger platform than that of just the X-Bar Ranch. And I was much, you know, as opposed to kind of the nature tourism and the tourism aspect of where my early career was in building that part of the business, tacking much more towards natural resource conservation, the importance of building the conservation ethic into a tourism enterprise, but then beyond that into the ranching enterprise. And I had a strong foundation to build from there with my family. But I tooled the business to be able to allow me to have that, but also do something beyond that. And that's where I came in contact with the Earth Partners and started yet another part of my journey, which has involved really what we focus on is trying to participate in or even create markets such that conservation is a market-based enterprise. And what I mean by that is that we can derive a product from conservation efforts that can in one form or another be sold in a marketplace that perpetuates that restoration work and continue those efforts forward. One of the key factors there, and a critical part of our mission in that endeavor, is making sure that the landowner is a critical part of the mix. And as we all know, in working with Texas, if you're going to have, or in Texas, if you're going to have an impact, and particularly an impact at any scale, that's going to involve private landowners. And so to the extent that private landowners have to be part of the mix, have to participate in the benefits that come from the work that we do, otherwise we're not meeting our mission as a company. And so that's, you know, I think that's something that we really take a lot of pride in aligning ourselves. What we also know and see today in this world where it is emerging in sort of payments for ecosystem services, if you want to call it that, and another thing that we feel like is really important to try to untangle is how you can bring capital into these markets, and where such that they can be scaled, where you can have impact, right? And you can have economics that benefit all the parties involved. The issue is in any emerging markets where there's risk and uncertainty, capital doesn't tend to like that, and things get expensive. And so we spend a lot of our time trying to refine systems, refine markets, as I've mentioned, create them such that that we can have, you know, good investments sitting alongside to enjoy and support these programs. So with that, you know, that's been a little bit of my journey in finding a way back to somewhere where I never thought I would be. My wife from Spain also never thought that she would live for 14 years in El Dorado, Texas, and now subsequently another 5 or 6 in San Angelo, where we call home today. But it's been a wonderful experience. And you know, the panel that's behind me, I've got to get out of their way. There's some other fantastic stories to tell. So I really appreciate this opportunity and look forward to visiting with any and all of you after the session this afternoon. Thank you very much.